They posed for cameras with guns and cigarettes. But behind the legend of Bonnie and Clyde is a trail of shattered families, dead police, and terrified towns, all rooted in crippling poverty and choices that spiraled into violence. The car they died in draws crowds, yet their story is no Hollywood romance. It is a chain of brutal facts most people never hear. What really drove Bonnie and Clyde down this dark road? Bonnie Parker's childhood began in the dusty crossroads of Rowena, Texas. When her father died in 1914, her mother packed up the children and moved them to West Dallas, a sprawl of shacks and muddy streets pressed against the city's edge. The Barrow family landed there too after losing their farm. Both families lived in the shadow of the viaduct, where the air hung heavy with coal smoke and hope was in short supply. By the early 1930s, the Great Depression had swept across Texas like a second drought. Nearly 1 in 4 Americans had no job. Bread lines stretched down city blocks, and families scavenged for food in alleys behind the factories. In West Dallas, even the lucky ones worked for pennies. Young people like Bonnie and Clyde watched banks seize homes and neighbors drift away with the dust. Bonnie was a bright student, known for her sharp wit and her poetry. She filled notebooks with dreams of escape, sometimes reading her verses aloud at school. One poem later found in a battered suitcase hints at the fatalism that would haunt her. Someday they'll go down together, and they'll bury them side by side. To few it'll be grief, to the law it'll be relief. But that's the way it goes. Clyde, restless and quick-tempered, found little promise in honest work. His first arrest came at 17, caught with a stolen car. In a neighborhood where desperation was as common as dust, petty theft was a way to survive. For both Bonnie and Clyde, the world outside their door offered little but hunger, closed doors, and the constant threat of being left behind. Clyde Barrow's first taste of trouble started in 1926, when he was just 17. Police caught him behind the wheel of a stolen car, a crime that landed him in the local jail. But petty theft in West Dallas was almost routine. Cars, turkeys, whatever could be lifted and sold for a few dollars. By the end of the decade, Clyde was no stranger to police lineups or cold cells. Bonnie Parker, meanwhile, was still married to Roy Thornton, a small-time crook who vanished from her life almost as quickly as he entered it. She wore his wedding ring long after he disappeared, but by 1930, she was scraping by as a waitress, her poetry tucked away in her purse. Their paths crossed in January 1930 at a friend's house in West Dallas. Clyde was restless, sharp-eyed, and already running from the law. Bonnie, drawn to his confidence, found herself swept into his orbit. The connection was instant. Within weeks, Clyde was arrested again for burglary and auto theft, this time facing a long stretch in the notorious Texas prison system. Bonnie made her choice. In February, she slipped a pistol through the bars of the Kaufman County Jail, helping Clyde stage a short-lived escape. He was caught days later, but Bonnie's loyalty was now sealed in court records. Clyde's months behind bars hardened him. He learned the rules of survival at Eastham Prison Farm, where beatings and hunger were daily fare. By the time he limped out on parole in 1932, 2 toes lighter and a promise on his lips never to return, Bonnie was waiting. From that moment, the line between love and lawlessness vanished. Their partnership was no longer a rumor whispered in West Dallas alleys. It was a fact, stamped in arrest records and fueled by a new sense of purpose. The first thefts together, cars, guns, whatever they could get, weren't acts of rebellion. They were the start of a pact, one that would soon leave a trail of broken locks and shattered lives across the South. On April 30, 1932, a quiet evening in Hillsboro, Texas, ended in bloodshed. Clyde Barrow and his crew entered John Bucker's jewelry store, looking for quick cash. When Bucker resisted, he was shot and killed on the spot. His widow's trembling voice later identified Clyde as the man who pulled the trigger. The obituary in the local paper was short, but the shock lingered in the town for months. 3 months later, on August 5, 1932, Stringtown, Oklahoma, became the scene of the gang's first lawman killing. Sheriff C.G. Maxwell and Deputy Eugene Moore approached a parked car, suspecting bootleggers. Clyde and Raymond Hamilton opened fire without warning. Sheriff Maxwell fell dead, and Deputy Moore was left wounded on the roadside. The town's main street filled with whispers and fear, and the funeral for Maxwell drew every officer in the county. In Dallas, December 1932, a stolen car led to another senseless death. Doyle Johnson, a young father, was shot trying to protect his vehicle from the Barrow Gang. His photograph, printed beside a plea for witnesses, reminded readers that these weren't just headlines. They were neighbors lost forever. Less than 2 weeks later, Deputy Malcolm Davis was gunned down during an ambush at a rendezvous point in Sowers, Texas. The Barrow Gang had taken to shooting first, leaving no room for mercy. By the end of that winter, 4 men, Booker, Maxwell, Johnson, and Davis, were dead. Small towns locked their doors. Lawmen began to shoot back. The smiling faces on wanted posters now carried the weight of real grief and real names, and the pursuit of Bonnie and Clyde turned deadly for anyone in their path. April 13, 1933, brought the Barrow Gang to a rented garage apartment on a quiet street in Joplin, Missouri. Clyde, Bonnie, Clyde's brother Buck, Buck's wife Blanche, and teenager W.D. Jones had hoped to disappear into the background, but the sound of gunfire and late-night laughter drew suspicion. Neighbors tipped off police, expecting to break up a gambling ring or bootleggers. Instead, 5 officers arrived that afternoon and walked straight into a storm of bullets. Detective Harry McGinnis fell almost immediately, and Constable Wes Harriman was shot trying to return fire. The gang blasted their way through the garage doors, bullets ricocheting off concrete, and escaped in a hail of gunfire, leaving 2 officers dead and chaos behind. In the rush to flee, the gang abandoned more than just weapons. Police searching the blood-splattered apartment found a battered camera and several rolls of undeveloped Kodak film. At the Joplin Globe, technicians developed the negatives and uncovered a series of photographs that would change everything. There was Bonnie, grinning with a pistol in one hand and a cigar clenched between her teeth. Clyde posed beside her, rifle resting on his hip, eyes cold and confident. Other shots showed the gang play acting, pointing guns, lounging on the running board of a stolen car. Bonnie mock-arresting Clyde with a smile. Within days, these images swept across the country by newswire. Newspapers from New York to Los Angeles splashed the photos on their front pages, turning the Barrow Gang into instant celebrities. The violence of Joplin was real. 2 lawmen dead, families shattered, but the camera's lens turned killers into icons. The public saw not blood, but bravado. Not fear, but still, the myth of Bonnie and Clyde was born in a flashbulb, and the hunt for America's most wanted outlaws went national. Frank Hamer stepped out of retirement on February 1, 1934, with a single mission: track Bonnie and Clyde. He started with stolen car reports, circling every Ford 5.8 theft across Texas, Oklahoma, and Louisiana. Each pin on his map closed the ring tighter. Hamer pored over gas station receipts and repair shop logs, asking quiet questions about young couples flashing cash and driving with out-of-state plates. He watched family farms and rural cemeteries, knowing the gang risked everything to visit home every few weeks. By spring, Hamer had charted 12 confirmed sightings, each one narrowing the gang's world. He worked with local sheriffs, staking out back roads and setting up informants, especially among families tied to the Barrow Gang. Every detail, every pattern, brought him closer to the highway near Gibbsland, Louisiana, where the final trap would be set. At 9:15 on a humid Louisiana morning, a Ford 5.8 rolled down Highway 154. Hidden in the brush, 6 lawmen waited, hands tight on their weapons. Deputy Prentice Oakley squeezed the trigger first, and Clyde Barrow slumped dead before his foot could leave the gas pedal. The car lurched forward as the posse unleashed a torrent of bullets, over 150 rounds in less than 30 seconds. Glass and metal shattered, the doors punched through by gunfire. Bonnie Parker never fired a shot. When the smoke cleared, both bodies were riddled with wounds. Word spread fast. By noon, crowds pressed in, tearing at clothing, reaching for locks of Bonnie's hair, desperate for a piece of the legend. The bullet-riddled car, still stained and twisted, would become the most famous artifact of their story. Even now, the bullet-riddled car and faded headlines draw crowds, blurring tragedy into spectacle. As history turns criminals into legends, the true human cost risks being lost. Every artifact, every story asks us, what do we choose to remember, and what do we choose to forget? Share your thoughts below.